All right. Good morning or good day, whenever you see this. My name's Tom Siebert. I'm here speaking with Zeph Daniel. He is the subject of a new documentary film called The Dark Side of Society, and that is actually a springboard off of the 1989 body horror film Society, which he wrote under his earlier name, Woody Keith. So I want to talk some with Zeph today about both of those movies, but not too deeply because we want you to see those movies, and just Hollywood and the occult in general, because Zeph is skilled in awareness of all of those things. So, Zeph, let's start with the beginning, and let's keep this short but informative, succinct information about the film Society. What is it about, just as a narrative?
As a narrative, it's in the horror field, but it's a satire about the rich being different from the rest of the human species and preying upon the species in order to maintain their wealth and power.
Okay, I would say that is, pardon my interruption, that
Okay,
that is not so
go
much.
ahead, edit me.
All right, but that is the important subtext to the film and why it's more than just a horror film. But superficially, what is the narrative of Society?
Well, the narrative, okay, so it's I guess if we have to label that, it's a little different than a satire. So I would say that it's, I guess, a thriller horror genre piece about a boy that's raised by his family to be sacrificed in a
No, that's good. Let's not give too much away. I want people to watch this film. And because I had not seen Society since it came out. Actually, in the early 90s was by the time it finally made it to America. And then I watched it again a couple of days ago, and I took much more out of it this many years later. And I'd like to get around to that, but I think that's a good introduction to Society. And then this year we have a documentary called The Dark Side of Society. Now, what is that about?
Well, that's about how I became a writer and my process of being, how art imitates life and vice versa. Being in family, an elite family in Beverly Hills, but not, being not in agreement with all their, let's just say their, no matter what I say, it's going to make me look kind of bad because, how people label each other, like if you say Satanism, well, what do you mean by that? That's a very broad term. Are they connected by, let's just say that high society, socialite society, society that runs the political parties, society that runs the world, the corporate world, that all that, they have their blocks of power around the world, like it could be a school, well, like we're hearing about Harvard now, but like it could be, a school, certainly a school, Washington, D.C., established corporations and all that. So I was in the midst of all that in a family that had a lot to do with like creating Los Angeles to be the wonderful and beautiful city that it is today.
Yes.
And
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please. I told you,
Yes. Okay. So at this point, I think it would be good to just name drop a few of the societal influencers that have been inside your bloodline. And they aren't necessarily famous people, but they are influential people, which goes to indicate just how many people are behind the scenes, puppet mastering everything. So if you could touch upon a couple people in your bloodline and what they did and accomplished.
Well, there's bloodline, literal bloodline, and then there's, do you mean bloodline meaning associations, or do you mean bloodline meaning bloodline all the way back to the beginning of your line?
Well, I was thinking just of some of the people that are related to you that were influential upon the Los Angeles region.
Well,
or maybe even bigger than the Los Angeles region now that I think about it. There were actual national cultural influencers, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it was like the main mover in our family was my grandfather, who was really running Los Angeles. He ran in addition to being uh, on the board of many corporations, he was running the civil defense for World War II of Los Angeles, and he was very influential. Like if you wanted something done in the state of California, you'd have to go see him. And sometimes they just call him the insurance man.
Right.
And if you wanted to make a deal, and it's like, one time someone asked him, how many pies do you have in your hands? He said, I'm into a little of this, a little of that, but he's into everything. And I have lots of pictures and stuff of how I just remember, Walt Disney bringing him into LA, for example,
Hmm.
was a big thing. Breaking, um, uh, building the Beverly Hills Hotel, which became an iconic Hollywood hotel, and, famous in the 40s and 50s, heyday of, Hollywood, and the big, back then there was the movie palaces and the influence of Hollywood. And he was also involved politically. He was a staunch conservative who loved war. And there was not a war mongering company he did not back.
Hmm.
Meaning he was really backing World War II. And he was touring the country trying to get everybody involved in World War II. And all this sounds pretty good, until you get into, because when you start talking about bloodlines, blood brothers, or masonry, things like that in the background, brotherhoods, connections that go to globalism and to global secret societies stemming from Greek mystery schools to, I mean, the list goes on to ancient Babylonian rites to more later trendy ones like the Golden Dawn and Madame Blavatsky and Gurdjieff and all these other practitioners of Manly P. Hall has had a big museum, like a library museum type thing, just across from um, Griffith Park.
It was just destroyed in the fire, I believe.
I don't know what happened. Last time I was there, it was there, but
Yeah, maybe
and
maybe it
then
wasn't Manly P. Hall. One of the libraries that the esoteric thinkers burned to the ground in the fire.
well, that's probably a good thing.
I like Manly P. Hall. I mean, I thought his book, was it The Guide to Secret Religions of All Time? I'd have to look it up. I've got
Yeah,
it.
he has the ultimate book on Freemasonry for sure,
Yes.
about what it all kind of means, but then there's the secret world of Freemasonry, and then I don't think you could even, well, anyway, the influence of Hollywood, and so he was involved in that, and
Well, I have to say, I just while we're touching on the Freemason thing, and I'm curious. I have heard from people when you get to the top of that first pyramid, you've really just reached the middle. And you know anything about that? Like you reach the 33rd degree, that's actually just the middle.
it goes well. See, now you're talking about where organized crime really kicks in, and
Let's take this where it goes. I mean,
okay, well, yeah, the thing about something like Freemasonry is if you have a brother that is on trial for murder and you're the fucking judge, you know what I mean? And you got to find a way to let him go. And when you look at today, where you go, well, where are the arrests of anybody? Where's any of the Epstein stuff? It's all in these. They can't do anything
right.
because of what I'm talking about.
Mutual assured destruction or just brotherhood vows that don't allow you.
They're ancient.
They're ancient.
These are ancient rites, and the rituals that go on, and then a lot of people claim satanic ritual abuse. Well, there is that, but where it starts getting really freaky and scary, okay, where this whole thing gets to be where people, I mean, literally, there's, I guess Stanley Kubrick hit on it in Eyes Wide Shut beautifully. I was very proud of him, as I usually am, but I mean, really proud with Eyes Wide Shut.
So proud it got him killed.
Well, I hope not, but gosh, he was already so established and he made so much money off the establishment. And he, you know, he owes his entire reputation almost to serving the establishment, and then to turn on them and stab them in the back like that, uh, which is how they see it.
Mhm.
And then it's like, well, what are they going to do? You got like Spielberg and Tom Cruise scrambling around trying to re-edit it, you know, so it doesn't have too much pedophilia in it.
Right. Well, I always, you know, I mean, I've been following that thing with I-5 Wide Shut forever. But I mean, if your theory is true and he was stabbing them in the back, I mean, it's a stabbing in the back on multiple ways, because he was keeping Tom Cruise out of the marketplace and all to himself. While Cruise was the biggest box office draw in the world, he had a contract that
Yeah,
Cruise couldn't
yeah.
work on anything else until he finished Eye Wide Shut. And that shit went on for almost 2 years. It was supposed to be done in like 8 months. Cruise was
Well,
locked out.
Kubrick, I mean, Cruise was obsessed with Kubrick. And, you know, because Cruise always whatever Cruise does, he wants to be the best, right? He's
Right. Yes.
got to be the best.
Right.
And Stanley's the best. So he's got to, you know, he's just got to get that shit down. He's got to pass muster. He's got to get the approval, you
Right.
know. So, you know, it's a very strange situation, but I can just say some of the offenses of Eyes Wide Shut, people may just pass this off like no big deal, but some of the offenses are structural in the sense of, okay, so Cruz shows up to the ritual, and it's, you know, it's a costume ritual, and you know, these are not uncommon, but I mean, it's not done every day or every weekend. It's not like the Anton LaVey show every week,
Right.
you know. And then a lot of this stuff's very mysterious as to who dies,
Hmm.
who's sacrificed. But he shows up, and you know, he really shouldn't be there.
Right.
He really shouldn't be there. And so somebody has to vouch, meaning someone has to pay with their lives.
Hmm.
And that woman that was
Mhm.
there that tried to warn him, she vouched for him, meaning she was going to die.
Right.
And then because if she didn't die, they would have to kill him.
Right. Yeah, you get that vibe when he gets called out and has to take his mask off, and then she calls out from the
Well,
balcony.
that information there is, you know,
Oh, you're
is
saying.
accurate.
Yes. Okay.
So, you know, and then look at like from gangs and gang violence and, you know, initiations involve, you know, a lot of times killing an innocent person to get in the gang, you know, just at the guttural level, you have a lot of these rules and things. And at the very, very top, you're dealing with, like I said, criminality, global criminality, and the guys that become like the movers and shakers, you know, have to make this pact with evil. And so a lot of times, like in my own family, was so strange. I mean, the price I paid wasn't telling them to fuck off because I didn't want to be involved in endorsing murder.
Hmm.
Okay, because I've seen already kids getting murdered.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you know, this is not it's just, you know, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it, you know, and if I even started talking like that, you know, next thing you know, you're railroaded into the mental hospital.
Right.
And then, you know, that's so that you have no credibility, you have no life, and then they'll gang stalk you and they'll set up a hit, but they try to make it look like you did it, and they have a network of everybody. They can sick people on you like, you know, to follow you and to, you know, to just basically ruin everything you're trying to do. And the whole message is, you know, you should have gone along when you had the chance, you know, and then all this shit wouldn't happen. So it's really not our fault. It's your fault.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And you know, you're the culprit. You're the one that just has to rebel.
Right.
You're the one that has to, you know, not go along to get along. You're the one that has to make waves. You're the one that has to rock the boat or whatever, you know, and so that's how they justify all the killing. And usually, you know, the structure goes like something, you know, once that's taken care of, say there's a family and they have somebody that's a pure heart that's coming along and they can't, which they call lame, like they, you know, shoot horses, don't they?
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's what we're talking about here.
I'd also heard the dead. The people who are not aware are the dead. DEAD. The dead.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if they're, yeah, then you have to get rid of them. in order to keep your position, your income, your your invitability to parties, which is pretty much all they think about. I don't think people that live in these worlds think about much else than who was at the party, who said what to whom. And as far as kids getting killed and human trafficking and modern warfare and basic criminality, they just laugh about it. I mean, they just think it's funny as hell. They're not lamenting, they're not upset, they don't feel guilt. And so that's why I think Brian Usna, the director of Society, really had to find a way to make it so it wasn't like, we had this kid as adopted in the beginning, but it wasn't strong enough. He wanted it to be like, there's no way he could have pleased his parents.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way he could have pleased society.
Right, right.
There's no way it would have ever worked out for him.
Right.
And Brian wanted to shut the door on any kind of possibility of that.
Right.
Which I think was actually genius. And that's what made the movie, really, that of course brings Screaming Man George in for all the body horror and surrealistic effects, which was so over the top for back then. And it was a big, satanic orgy at the party, like Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh,
but
way beyond even that. Way beyond even that.
No, and then actually there's a secret novel Brian and I have been writing, and we have it. I don't know. It's up to him if he ever releases it, but it has a shunting scene, that finale, that is so graphic, it's so vivid, it's so disturbing, as I would say it's something new. Like if you read this book, it's not like you're getting the Society movie. You're getting something much deeper and more grossly disturbing.
Right.
So
I'd like to touch on that for a second, because even when you and I were speaking on the phone the other day, when I saw Society in 1992 or 93, I can't recall, the midnight movie, I found that extended climax with the shunting and the body horror like tough to watch. Like, it left me feeling sick. I was horrified. When I watched it, like, yesterday, I was like, yeah, that's gross, but I wasn't put off the way that I was. And I'm wondering if that's just because film has become so extreme, or maybe it's the theatrical experience compared to just like sitting in my living room, and even though the house is dark. I mean, what do you think is going on with that? Because I bet I'm not the only one who feels that way.
Stuff's bubbling the surface all over the world, about the existence of a secret shadow government that rules over us, that like people that work really hard and they can't pay their bills wonder, why is that?
Right.
Well, it's because a lot of they're being taxed unfairly and gouged unfairly, and their money is being stolen, and used to buy somebody a yacht.
Right.
Right. Just for just fritting it away and just let the poor, eat shit and get, worse and worse off. So a lot of like socialist and, hardcore leftists really like Society because of that aspect, because it's showing how it's the perfect thing, because it shows how these people the problem can never be solved.
Right.
It would take a violent, bloody revolution.
Right.
To solve it. And it's funny, when I was back then in that state and I was being persecuted by them, and I don't know why I moved back to LA. I mean, I was, definitely questioning myself. I guess it's because they convinced me that none of that was real. So this was my way of trying to find out if it was real or not. And the more I found out it was real, the more I got persecuted and treated almost insanely, ridiculously unfairly in terms of, just death, die motherfucker, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
again, yes, people have tried to kill Zeph, and this is in the documentary. And, we want to drive people to watch the documentary because it is an eye opener. The dark side of society. Um, and so I don't want to go too deeply.
No, there's a
Some of,
lot said in there that there's enough said in there in the movie that if you watch that and nothing else, if you don't listen to me here, you're going to have enough. I'm not going to go on into a lot of detail because there's enough there to get anybody started
right,
down the path of knowledge.
right,
And once they understand the world they live in and the futility of the whole thing, then they'll realize that. Well, they'll realize a lot of things, but I mean, they'll realize that their whole life they've grown up in this. I'm just thinking about people that I, kind of grew up with in these neighborhoods. I'm thinking about the Menendez case too, is another pertinent thing. It's another thing, the Diddy case,
hmm,
that's, coming up, the Epstein case, all these cases. And, to be honest, the Diddy case seems to pale by comparison. I mean, I know it's bad,
right,
I'm sorry that he beats up people and women and all that, but it's just, and whether they have anal sex or front ways or back ways, none of my business.
right,
Well,
exactly,
it's fully legal.
right,
It's when we start trafficking, children to like millions per year who never return home because they don't return anywhere
right,
because they're dead
yes,
and they're
yes,
used to harvest adrenochrome and stuff like that so that the elites can have their little fancy addictions and feel like they're immortal and they're powered by the gods.
right. Well, I want to say yes. Also, this is why um, there's a difference between a body horror film like well, Society, obviously, or something like The Substance, where this is being used as
Yeah.
a metaphor for something else. Like, I think The Substance is about adrenochrome. I think that's what it's a metaphor for. And yours
And
is
it's a
about,
metaphor for society because they basically copied
yeah, it is kind
exactly
of
the style of
obvious.
society body. I mean, they copied it to the T.
Well, I mean, I don't know about to a
Come on,
T.
it was exact.
Influenced by.
Okay. I'll take it like this. Maybe, imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
Okay. I
I can
mean,
look at it
sure. Yes, no, I would say Society was the braver, more daring movie simply because it came out before anybody was even considering things like this. But I see the central metaphor of Society more about the rich being parasites on everybody else,
Yeah.
while the Substance is more of a metaphor about Hollywood in general and the
And youth.
desperate means that people will go to, buttress their career as they age and such.
Yeah, it's the picture of Dorian Gray.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So see, it had more than one influence, more than one influence. Um,
Well, that's the old Faustian uh, bargain, that you give your soul over to me,
right,
I'll make you a star.
right.
And, you might just be very comely and very, kind of frumpy looking and you ain't sexy at all. And I can turn you into a goddess,
Hmm.
you know, and sure. But see, that's real, actually.
Yeah.
I've seen people go over when they were teenagers and you see them like a week later, high school, and all of a sudden they're wearing all these different kind of clothes and they're just like super hot and super sexy and just everything that they say is cool and they're just right in there, right in the midst of everything. And like Peter Gabriel's song, She's So Popular,
Hmm.
comes to mind, and invited to all the parties and they go that way and that becomes their path in life.
Right.
And
Yes.
then they have a kid, let's say, if they're unfortunate enough to get pregnant, they have a kid, say like me, who comes along and ruins the whole party.
Hmm.
We were on a roll. All you had to do was kill your uncle.
Oh God. Um, so yeah, you threw me off there. I was going to say something else
Sorry.
about Society. Oh, I know. The cut like it was funny again because I didn't see Society until the early 90s. And by that time, Beverly Hills 90210, Melrose Place, all those sorts of TV shows had
Yeah,
been out for a couple years. So
very
when I
popular.
saw Society, I thought the cinematography and the direction was like partially a parody of those types of shows, except it came first. It was like it had the Southern California colors. It had that sort of like, late teenage feel to it at first before it drags you darker and darker. But it's actually an inversion. Society was there before all of these shows, which
Yeah.
is uncanny to me.
Yeah. It's got a good start. And Brian was telling me that he's going to do a restoration for the 40th year anniversary, which is coming up in the 28, I guess. And is going to really, they're going to spend some money on it and really make it, just basically for theatrical, release, since people have such a good time with it. In fact, I believe it's playing this week in Beverly Hills. I can't tell you, it's like whether it was the art houses used to be called the Lemley Theaters. I don't think it's called that.
Hmm.
The Music Hall, maybe it's on, I believe it's on Wilshire in Beverly Hills as you go down toward Los Angeles. And Joe Dante will be there, a bunch of other people. So that's going to be a chance to see it. Now it'll be midnight, and Brian will be there for a Q&A. So I would then encourage anybody to go see it in that form.
Yes.
And there are people talking to me now. They want to have Dark Side of Society and Society and run them back to back, and then have me do a Q&A at, say, a festival like one in Phoenix that we've been talking about. And uh,
Those two movies back to back, I think, are still shorter than the new Mission Impossible movie. So why not?
well, but it's length is really, in movies, I think length is really determined by the piece itself.
Yes.
Because you can any longer, I don't think I could have taken any more of Dark Side going on any further.
No, I agree with you. When after I saw it, I called you guys and said, I think it's the perfect length. It's like
Yeah,
75 minutes. It's like, boom, boom. Because again, like
yeah,
I
yeah.
like the documentary, but after having seen Society, I think everybody should see Society, even if you got to fast forward through the last 20 minutes or so, because it really is, I mean, a timeless work of genius, which I was not expecting like when I rewatched it a couple days ago, because it kind of turned my stomach the first time I saw it. But I just looked at it in such a different way. And the cinematography is so good. And like there's not a wasted second. It's got a 3-act structure. I mean, it's just a well-told story, and it's got great subtext. So
And it had a lot of, like I said, a lot of work, a lot of eyes on it. And Brian had a very strong vision for it. He was like, he dropped everything to go once he saw Society. And I think it was Rick Fry that brought it to him, which was the guy that I had brought into the project to help with the third act. And then Rick just was down for the whole ride. So we just kept collaborating. And that was interesting. That was fun with Rick because he was more of an analytical mind. So here we have the analytical mind, and I'm more of a creative. And then Brian's got like he's got the artistic mind, and he's got also a philosophical mind. Which that's where the rich are somehow different than the rest of
say
us,
the
different
least.
species.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so he brought that in. And like I say, without that, I don't think we would have had a movie.
Hmm.
And I mean, we might have had a movie, a flash in the pan, but I don't think we would have had an enduring movie. And a lot of people have talked about doing Society too.
Hmm.
And I saw Brian had a treatment on it, and I read it, and it's damn good and everything. But gosh, I wouldn't even. When I had approached Society in the beginning, it was all, kind of like part of my own mental illness. It was so weird. And because I had a deep-seated anger toward the Society and toward everything. And I was scared to death of what they were going to do to me. And so I was, you know, I mean, at that time, I mean, it was either the writing or become a terrorist.
Well, thank you for
No,
doing the writing.
no, the writing was actually more powerful than being a terrorist.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing. That's what I wanted to leave people with is, your writing can help you, when you're processing trauma and me, it was just jumbled up. I mean, you know, I said it, the thing, I mean, I didn't know I was writing the terms of my getting released from this long-term facility, and I can't say the name or anything in the Midwest, was was I had to like sign a thing. This is what's really strange, that said there were no people there at the house that night.
Hmm.
There were
Okay.
there was no
And see,
people.
now we've got to get the no people at which house, what night? We're starting to get
The
into
night
something.
that's in society, it's
Yes.
in the,
Okay.
where Billy has the knife.
Yes. Yes.
And that
Yes.
was based on like a real event. And you know, there was a night I had to have the knife and I had to, you know, be willing to kill if I had to. And that's where we can tie into Menendez. Except in this case, we had people all kinds of all over the house, you know,
Hmm.
and hiding, you know, in the locked bedrooms and in closets and in, like in a sauna up in an apartment off the pool and just, you know, and you can hear them breathing, you know, and then I look outside and, you know, well, it's pretty much basically almost exactly what Billy goes through, the character. And it was very close to what was happening. But the whole point was that I had to admit it wasn't real and that I was, you know, sick, nuts, crazy, and my life is ruined. So therefore, I'll just go along and be a victim. You tell me and I listen, you know,
Right.
I'll be your robot.
Yeah. No, it's extreme
And
gaslighting.
so then I got there and then, you know, we went through making of the movie, which was very exciting. I mean, a total thrill, you know, and for people that have the stamina to do it, I recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart, though. But anyway, I didn't, you know, that programming was starting to come undone at that point. And then I realized, you know, that I was set up and that it was all real. And then, you know, and then somebody helped me to achieve that understanding who was very much in the mix of all of that stuff that was going on and verified it was real. And then Trish came along and we became an item. And then she became witness of a bunch of stuff. And, you know, I had to eventually accept that. Well, when I wrote Society, I didn't think it was real.
Right.
I mean, because I'd been trained hardcore to think it wasn't,
Mm.
and drugged and trained and you know, they were going to just send me to jail if I didn't believe it.
Right.
So I mean that this wasn't, and that would have been like 10-year sentence.
Mm.
That would have finished me off. That would have been it.
Mm.
So that, you know, it was like very important, I think, to my mother that I said the words. This is very David Lynch, you know, you have to say the exact words in this sequence. There were no people at the house that night, right, Woody?
Mm.
That's right. There were no people at the house that night. Okay. You know, let's see if we can maybe get him a job playing drums with a band and keep him in bumfuck Topeka, Kansas or whatever, and make sure he never returns to LA.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, you know, that's what they say. You know, you read about these secret societies and stuff, and like young children who are abused get fed into the system in a way that makes them famous or gratifies them in some way. So they keep their mouth shut, you know, but then they also have something hanging over them so they can use them as an asset if need be.
well, the funniest thing is to have the be out there and you have West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Westwood, all those kind of Western, you know, leading to Malibu. And, you know, then the people say, well, there's you know, Boys Town, you know, the gay community, the heart of it is West Hollywood. I'm like, what? I thought this was the gay community.
Right. Well, yeah, all of Hollywood in general, maybe. Um,
I'm just saying that it's everybody everywhere all the time. I mean, where is it not gay? Where is it not? And again, not that I really care. It's just when it gets made into, then you'll be murdered.
Right.
Then you'll do what we say or you'll be killed, understand? And and then of course sex is always part of all that stuff. So it's I don't know, I couldn't believe my own peer group would put up with that. But I guess the ones that didn't, they're not around.
Right. Yeah, they kill those. Well, yes, and this has occurred to me earlier. It just like, and this is really the subtext of your film, both films actually, that uh their perception of what society is different from what everybody else is. Like their whole worldview is like, as you say, or kind of implied, like this is the natural order of things. This is just the way it goes. The wealthy have always preyed on the poor. That's just the way it is, and we're the wealthy, and that's the way it goes, right?
That's how it is. And that's exactly how they think.
Yes, right,
That's as much emotion as you're going to get out of them.
right, yes,
And then it's like, if you say anything else, it's like, I really don't want to talk about this. And I really, you're really irritating me right now. Can we just flip the topic to like, the football game last
right,
night or something like that? Please.
yes,
What's wrong with you?
yes,
What are you trying to, get everybody hurt, killed here?
right,
Just shut up
right, yeah.
and everything will be fine.
So,
Is it real? So the reason I didn't shut up, it wasn't that I didn't shut up. I was trying to find out if it was real or not.
right. Well, I
And
think
that's
just like bigger picture now, like it seems to me more and more people are realizing this is real. We are seeing legitimate, even maybe subconscious pushback. Do you have any
yeah.
sort of insight into what might be going on bigger picture here now? Because they clearly do not dominate the way they used to.
But in the background, what's percolating is total annihilation of all people.
Mm.
And that's still percolating.
Well, I believe it is, but I like, for example, like,
Closer in, we have, the corporate structure and all that. But these people out here, this annihilation group out here is still in control.
mm,
And this is my opinion.
right,
Certainly
right, yes,
still in control. And I believe that they also dictate policy and orders to they may not be as hidden as they were. And people can't even really identify them. I said, even if they paraded them out in a perp line, you wouldn't recognize any of them.
right,
You wouldn't recognize there'd be like a little kid over here, or there'd be like some guy with horn rimmed glasses, nerd with a briefcase. You wouldn't, you just wouldn't look at these people as bloodthirsty killers, who are ready to push the button to annihilate the human race. So that struggle's going on too, where the lower rungs, the ones you do see, the wealth and power you do see, trying to stop the more philosophical ones who just are against humanity and this entire carbon existence of everything, trying to change that policy to be more to let beings have their creation, and this is where I have to step off and say, look, if you don't know it's a spiritual battle by now, if you don't know that there's maybe a mystery as to why it exists, but if you don't realize that you can't handle it, and there's only one entity that can handle it and handle us at the same time without us completely flipping out. Because I tell you, you take this information on your own and you don't have a relationship with God in some way of justifying your existence. And all you've got is your intellect running around and mommy trauma. I'll just tell you this, you ain't going to make it.
huh.
You're
Yes.
not, you're eventually gonna, like a lot of these guys, I say they all wind up down at the racetrack and they end up, it's like the men's club and all these men are desperate and they're hurt.
Okay, we're back here, part two with Zeph Daniel. I thought like we left off on a really good place where I want to sort of expand on in this second part where Zeph basically was like, get right with God or you're doomed. And I mean, I think that's why like we even do what we do. I mean, I know that's why I do what I do, because I don't want people going to hell or having their soul evaporate into nothingness. And I just think this world would be a better place if we all realize that there is this one true God who does love us, and we can make this world a better place. I think, I hope. I mean, so like I would ask you, from your personal experience, you've seen true evil closer than I have. I've seen like superficial evil in advertising and that kind of stuff, and I know I've caught whiffs of the occult inside that sort of thing. But like you've really been amongst it, and so like, could you help give us a perspective on what it is that we're actually up against and the best ways for us to deal with it and perhaps either hold it at bay or defeat it?
Well, for most people, it's just the explosion of witchcraft that has occurred because of especially in the 60s, the embracing of the occult was so strong then. And it devolved into all kinds of, practitioners, witchcraft practitioners. And, it's funny, you see a lot of these like sigils and stuff with some of the marches for like Antifa. You see these
Yes.
witchcraft type of signage. I know we had one down here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the square, and this guy that was with us, he, hocked a big loogie on it, just hocked to it. I said, "Don't do that. Don't do that." Lo and behold, we got attacked by like something inside the vehicle. It was like it was just moving around. It was the guy. We had to stop the car and I'll get out and and actually pray because it was a very strong demon
Hmm.
that I guess if you see that's built in this kind of vengeance. And so anybody that doesn't just sum it up real quick. So anybody that doesn't really get with it, the occultic world,
Right.
which is what it is, becomes a target.
Okay, let me just go back. Like you said witchcraft. I mean, whenever I write about witchcraft, I usually have a few witches who send me messages to say I'm giving it a bad rap. They're white witches, they're nature witches, they're farmers, they sustain the earth, they bring us our food,
Yeah.
they're
Pagans.
sustaining femininity by, bearing children and creating. So like, is all witchcraft bad? Is that what you're saying? Like even these people
Well,
who think they're doing good are not?
theoretically, they're doing quantum physics. If
Okay.
you really want to just look at what they're doing, sending energy to create something in God knows how many miles or what the distance is. But the old quantum physics experiment about how distance does not affect the thought patterns or waves that we would send. They may be a frequency, but they can immediately influence something millions of miles away or hundreds of millions of light years away. And so that brings everything in the universe together. And then, they have there's lots of offshoots of it and all that. I mean, I'm just saying, in my life, I grew up with a lot of that around me, just, and it got really kind of terrible. At one point, I couldn't even walk into my parents' house without one of the housekeepers or her or somebody lighting black candles in front of me.
Okay, but I
Yeah,
mean, your personal experience, I don't dispute in
yeah,
any way,
yeah.
shape, or form. But
Well, it was just basically a curse.
okay, but so that was the dark occult, and they were maybe witches who are pursuing a negative force for power or whatever.
And they get involved in, especially one thing they love, stirring the pot is, poisoning people.
Hmm.
And I went through that a few times. And then there's criminality, murdering people. And, so they don't testify at the grand jury or whatever. It's all that's tied in, that the great organized crime syndicates around the world are all beholden to Lucifer.
Yes, and I don't dispute that
And
again.
I'll take a blood
But
oath. Yeah.
is the practice of magic or the occult really inherently evil and dark? Because I have, white witches and light Luciferians and practitioners of certain things who contact me again and again, like you say, like, look, as a Christian, you're closed-minded. There is goodness to be found, for people who practice white magic and things like that. So
Why would they even want to write you? I mean, or me or anybody. I mean, why not just, if they're doing so well, they should just go about their lives and not, don't worry about a little criticism here and there.
because they don't all want to be lumped together. That would be like the same sort of reaction where, let's say it was about race, like there's like, well, everybody black is bad. That's clearly not the case,
Well, yeah, I mean, no,
So like
but I mean,
everybody who practices
history.
witchcraft is bad. I mean, is that
Okay,
true?
so here's a funny history of witchcraft. Okay, so we had the Salem witch trials, and they're putting to death of the witches, except the one thing that I understand from history is that the people put to death weren't witches. They were what I would call lambs,
Hmm.
pure hearts, innocent ones. They were put to death because, and here was the reasoning, and you can go, it's available to read about this kind of angle on it. Because they were good, and they prayed in church,
Hmm.
and they helped the poor, and they cared about other people. So therefore, they must be evil.
Hmm.
They must be a nasty witch. And they're not giving head to the pastor, or whatever,
Right. Yes.
And so they get cooked at the, burned at the stake, and here we are again, the same thing in society. That's the same thing. And it goes on and on and on. The Inquisition. What the hell was that? Putting to death anybody that, I mean, I think I know who it was, the masquerade of the old Jacobins, parading, and the Jesuits involved in, their usual murder cults.
Right. Well, again, that we can maybe touch on that in a second. I just,
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
it's just another of quite a few different offshoots of these, occultic. I mean, it's the occult that holds back the world.
hmm,
So why shouldn't you criticize these witches for? I mean, it may seem innocent. You're doing a little pagan dance out in the woods, you know what I mean? And maybe even you kill a goat, which is, and then you're going to eat the goat, so it's not that bad, you know. And you're celebrating nature and the changes to seasons and celebrating new babies coming in and all that. And if it was really that, all that and a bag of chips, I would endorse it. But I have to say, why are you giving us a bad name? And I'd say because you earned yourself a bad name.
I think the public profile practitioners of the occult are generally um, negative branding for the occult. I would agree with that. Uh,
But it's like if there's smoke, there's fire.
okay, all right, I'm willing to go with that. But
You remember
again,
that film? You remember that film, Race with the Devil? The people
yes,
on the
terrified me. Great, a
fun
great
film.
movie though. Great B movie. Yes,
Terrified me too. But that they saw just a glimpse of that sacrifice
right.
on the woods. You know what I mean? But that was enough to get the whole hive,
Hmm.
all the local towns and everybody. They were all in it.
Hmm.
Do you remember another series? And Betty Davis was in this one. It was called this. It was a TV series, a mini series called The Secret of Harvest Home.
Oh no, but I have read the Thomas Tryon book, Harvest Home.
Okay, so maybe it's connected.
Yeah, it was adapted, I
Uh,
think, from that. Yes.
I was so triggered from watching that I drove all the way from the Midwest to LA just based on that. I was hiding out in hotel rooms. I was scared to death that they were going to get me, and it was just because I watched this. And there was something in there that really triggered me, something really real. And well, Betty Davis was like a cartoon character. She'd had these long scissors, that she'd have on her hip, and they all wore like black, and they were, they would raise they would raise a child, a super child, their best, to be
Moonchild.
sacrificed, to be
That's
sacrificed at the end of the year. He was like the prince or a god, a king level.
hmm,
And during that year, he'd get anything he wanted. They would serve him, they would do anything for him. But then come that night, the night of the sacrifice,
hmm, right.
that's it.
Wow.
And then he would be sacrificed. So there's another very interesting parallel to society that um, I just found that to be, and people who would speak out of turn just to talk about that, because that's a big problem with these people. You're seen as a traitor. Well, she would go around with her shears on her hip, and she like one guy, she cut his tongue out.
Hmm.
The other guy, she cut his eyes out.
Right. Well, that's the way it ends. That's the way the book ends anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So see no evil, hear no evil. But that was whoever wrote that, they were dialed in
Uh,
totally to
Thomas
the.
Tran, he was a former Hollywood actor. He was
He probably got all his training from Hollywood.
he might, I mean, Harvest Home, and he had like three supernatural books where if you read them, it's obvious like truth and fiction type
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and then he died young mysteriously too, if I remember correctly, after his
Well,
third book.
that was strong stuff.
Yes.
And I mean, if you got triggered, if you didn't, I guess it'd be fine. But I was very vulnerable at that time, and it really fucked me up
Hmm.
seeing that particular thing. And because I was very busy putting it out of my mind. And then along comes this, it's like boom, right? Blows it all up again. And there it is. It's real.
Right.
It's you're you're fooling yourself.
Right.
It's real. You better go to the psychiatrist and get some Xanax and some whatever else they give you down there at the Menendez brothers doctors. That's another weird parallel is that
Well, right. Well, actually, let's touch on that for something, because it's interesting to me how the things that you experienced and escaped from by the skin of your teeth seems to have uh, uh, captured the Menendez brothers,
it
who
could have been the same outcome though,
right, yes,
and
right. Well,
I
yeah,
could have been in there with them. So
right.
uh, and the funny thing about it, I know the house. It was like three doors up, and it was a decade later that all that happened because I was like a decade earlier.
Hmm.
But then they were on Elm, it was on Elm Drive, and I think there's actually a portal there on Elm Drive. I think there's something evil in that road, something nasty that exists there because it's just, this just what I'm bringing up now. And then of course that connection to the psychiatrist they had, Dr. Jerome Oziel, and they had the Beverly Hills Phobia Center. I think it was on no, I think it was on Bedford Avenue. So it would have been one of the last streets in retail Beverly Hills before you got to like Wilshire and Santa Monica interchange. Anyway, and it's funny, I was treated for panic attacks by that same place.
Hmm.
And they tried to like get Oziel, and Oziel was somehow involved in some way. And, there was a weird, I don't know the whole Oziel case. I just know from the Ryan Murphy show and the various documentaries, that everyone else has watched. The involvement. I just was amazed. I'm like, the same psychiatrist, the same street, the same problem. Mommy is poisoning the food.
Hmm.
And dad says, you breathe the word to anyone, and it looks like they're going to breathe the word to anyone, you're going to be killed. I'll kill you.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but they really wanted Rolexes and a couple of Porsches. So they went down to Big Five and got the shotguns and blew their parents away. And they got a moment in the sun with the Porsches and the Rolexes. And then they've done hard time ever since.
Right. Right.
Uh, it's just a story that I know Dominic Dunn, the famous um, Vanity Fair writer,
Yeah.
he's a big he was a big journalist on the west side of LA. He's like had quite a reputation.
Oh, I used to read him religiously in Vanity Fair. He's a terrific writer. He really is.
Oh yeah, very, very witty. And yeah, I went to school with his son, Griffin Dunn.
Griffin Dunn, the actor. Yeah.
Yeah.
In that very good Martin Scorsese movie. What is it? After Hours? After
And
Hours.
then he had a lot of his own little movies that were all quite good, I thought. But anyway, it was he lost his daughter, Dominique,
Yes.
to a killer.
Yes.
And the guy got off. It was just one of those things. So then when the Menendez case came up, he wasn't having it. He wanted those boys locked up and the key thrown away and any kind of torture that could happen in there to rich kids or privileged kids by anyone that wanted to abuse them and let them have at it. I mean, he was ready for blood, and he's probably hated the fact he was probably in there for the death penalty. But he was really, really triggered. Plus, in LA at that time, you had the OJ getting off,
Right.
and that made the DA look really bad. And so now they need a win.
Right.
What's next on the calendar? The the abused kids from Beverly Hills.
Right. Right.
And how far do you think they're going to get?
Right.
And not far at all. And even with that the attorney Leslie Abramson, who totally, I believe she believed them, but she looks like she believes. I don't know. Maybe that's an act, but she, it seemed like she believed him. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And but she couldn't do any good at all. In
Well,
other
again,
words,
they got destroyed by the media. Nobody really knew what happened there at
well, they're
first.
not supposed to. You're not supposed to kill your parents.
Right. Well, that's true. Okay. Nobody's right. But you're not
You
supposed
know,
to abuse your children either.
right, right. But I mean, if say I had lucked out and I was able to just stab them to death, and I'm just being facetious
Right.
now.
Right. Right. Okay. But I mean,
But let's say I'd done that, or I did that. It would be fair to lock me up. It would be fair, and it would be fair for me to take the death penalty. But all I would tell you is that, I mean, I know what would happen if it hadn't happened already. I would just double down on my faith, and and I would ask God for forgiveness, and try to be good to other people, and try to make up for what I had done.
hmm,
I mean, but I'm not perfect. You squeeze something enough, you put somebody up against a wall enough, you gaslight somebody enough, you throw the whole city on some kid that doesn't know what's going on, and totally can, and then, show them the roof of the, a 40-story building and say, now just jump off of there and everything will be fine. If you do that enough to some kid, don't be surprised if he doesn't come back with a shotgun
right. Right. I agree.
and,
Well, I
and
mean,
shoot somebody.
well, let me ask you because I know, I mean, we're both Christians, but like I often get messages from people, oh, you're being too rough. You shouldn't speak, with profanity. You shouldn't be wishing death on these people, even if they're evil. You should be praying for their salvation. And it's like there's part of me. It's like, yeah, I get that. But it's like I don't think these people are going to listen to that. I mean, I guess their hearts can be touched by God, but
Yeah.
I'm not God. It's like
And
I
it's
think we're at
it's a
war. This is a war.
yeah, I was in the war of what I call the prophecy war online when I started my podcast in 2002 after leaving LA. And I just went with God, and I just started doing ministry. And I got attacked from every angle: the church, the online people, everyone calling me a false prophet, people bringing up my past and making movies and seeing nudity in the movie and going, you see, he's really one of them.
Mm.
That kind of thing. And the gaslighting I got as a Christian, I have to say, it was worse than any Satanist ever treated me.
A lot of the time that's the case. It's and I don't.
Well, they killed Jesus,
Yeah, right, right,
the
right.
good people.
But I mean, a lot of these things isn't even so much that they want to, like kill me or harm me. They basically make me want to like stand down. and just like wait for Jesus to come on this cloud or for the
Yeah,
world
they
to
want to shut
end.
you up. They want you to be quiet.
Yeah,
They don't approve of what you're talking about. And what you're talking about, see, eventually will lead to corruption in the church
well,
or
it will
corrupt
lead to it.
people. Fake Christians, that's a good topic for you.
Yeah.
And they know it's going to go there with you because I know you're that critical guy. So you're going to go there. And when you see that, like some guy writes a book or does something or makes a movie or whatever it is, and it's not real and there's something wrong with him, they know that you're going to try to expose him.
Mm. Yeah,
And
but I think that these people who want me to like stand down or like not be combative, I don't think that it's like I don't think they think in a malevolent way. I just don't understand the passivity. I like just lie back and take it because, Jesus said, if you suffer, then you're like me or whatever. I mean, like I just don't want to like lean back and let them take over the world in hopes that when things get really, 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 really bad, Jesus is going to come down on this cloud and like save the day. I mean,
well, he will do that too.
we're okay. At some point, in some way, I suspect that's going to happen. But like, I don't want to go through all this suffering and horror when I
Yeah.
think we can slow it down or stop it.
It's and then there's the old philosophical, battle that, identified in religions like Buddhism and other religions, that's desire for things, materialism, that desire for things, for people, for better jobs, for whatever it is we desire, leads to suffering. And that one must end suffering has to end desire. And the thing about that is, well, that's awfully hard to do. I mean, the monks have tried to not desire. They've tried not to walk on the grass and be a negative cause to anything, or not want any kind of cars or any just a bowl of rice, and get through it. And even they couldn't make it on their own.
Right.
With their own version of the Ten Commandments, which they have like a little Ten Commandment thing of ethics to follow,
Hmm.
and just like our Ten Commandments. So Jesus is it's like, well, see, I always tell the Buddhists about Jesus because I just figure once they understand, it's like the perfect solution to Buddhism is Jesus.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
Because that's you shift the desire from human desire to desire for him.
Yep.
And that desire for him takes off that onus, that anvil of envy and strife, and takes it off of you.
And
And
fear. Fear is gone.
fear,
That's
fear.
like the best thing. I mean, really.
Yeah, yeah. But it's, the Bible also says that suffering builds character. And that's the thing. And that, when they see us talking, having been through these spiritual wars and bitterness out there and all this stuff, and we're laughing a little bit, and not obviously we're not suffering today, we're having a great time with you today. Um, then people ask questions like, wait a second, you're not supposed to be happy. I hate that.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Using the Kevin Spacey line from the Swimming with Sharks. He'd see his assistant, he goes, you look happy. I hate
I
that.
forgot that. Yes.
So,
Ah, um,
but see, that's actually a very profound line in the context of everything. There was a really great line that shows character. That what happens to people when they get so petty. I mean, they get so petty that, like, you go into like whatever the big steakhouse is now. They've all changed out in LA, but I mean, you go in there, and there's usually a seat that so and so movie mogul always sits in that seat.
right. Yes.
If you get that seat, then oh my God, he comes in and he sees his seat's taken, and he's like, "What's this?" And it becomes a giant litigation.
Yes. That miniseries on probably based on a real event, The Offer, where Robert Evans goes into the
Yes,
place where he has breakfast every day, and the guy's
that's called
sitting there.
the Polo Lounge.
Yes, yes,
That's in the Beverly Hills Hotel.
yes.
Well, oh boy, that's the history of that place and the Polo Lounge. And yeah, Evans would hold court. That was Evans' his casting office, and set up office there and have a phone in there and
Yes.
a little bit. People would go to that to that restaurant for strictly to be seen. It had no other purpose. I don't even think they had a pretty good, like, fish salad or so, little Cobb salad. Everybody had a Cobb salad, but that was a place where, you went there when you were trying to make some noise.
Hmm.
And then if you wanted to really eat, then there was, you could go down to Ma Maison where you had Orson Welles would hang out. They gave him a table every day when he was staying with Peter Bogdanovich.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so he would go down there and get be able to eat for free, but he was a draw
Right.
because he'd be sitting there kind of like the big king.
Yes.
And and people would go see him. And I'm just not I'm trying to think of any kind of cuisine that was actually based on great food. And I'm sure there are those, but I don't think they're as well advertised. I think they're probably trying to keep them secret.
Maybe now. I mean, I don't know. When I was a junket whore and going out to Hollywood to review movies, and they would take us out to these restaurants, I remember having some amazing meals at,
Yeah, oh yeah.
you know, again, and I guess this was the late '90s, early 2000s, but I don't think LA is a shortage of great restaurants,
Cuisine, yeah.
cuisine such. Um, but I mean, and just to touch on that for a moment, because I know you know the industry and kind of what's going on out there. I mean, say what you will about Robert Evans. I mean, and the guy was cutthroat, but I mean, he loved movies. I don't think we got anybody close to a Robert Evans producing film in Hollywood today. They all seem to be delusional bean counters who can't tell what's good and what's not. I mean, is this a salvageable situation? Or are we kind of done for? Or are they kind of done for?
Well, because it runs on fear and is risk averse. And Evans was a iconoclast,
Yes.
he was not going to. There were a few guys like that, and then there's another batch that came out after Evans, which was the Francis Ford Coppola ilk,
Hmm.
which was another batch of very brave people. And I guess you just have to not care. You just have to not care about, be willing to spend whatever it is on your reputation, like doing the right thing. You say, well, I like Elon Musk, and that should ruin your career. And you'll say, well, I like Elon Musk anyway, and I don't care what you think at the Polo Lounge or down at Warner Brothers or at Paramount. I like Elon Musk, and I'm going to drive his Cybertruck, and you can go fuck yourselves. And that might end your career. I don't know. But in those days, those guys, they were flamboyant too.
Right.
They dressed and
Yep.
the glasses, right? He had those aviators he
Yes.
always
But he was
and
a performer himself. I mean, Robert Evans was literally larger than life. I don't know if there's anybody on that
I
scale.
don't know if the movies will ever be as good as they were back in the 60s and 70s and you know some in the 80s.
But even if they're not as good, are we at least going to get like
Three
studio
acts.
guys who know quality at least? I mean, like just a quick story. I once had an advertising agency boss inside like $1 billion conglomerate, confide in because he like kept bringing me into his office over the course of like 3 months, like show me stuff. Then I was like, yeah, this is good, or this is not good, or this should do this or whatever. And then one day, I don't even know where it came out. He was like, I got to tell you, Tom, I can't tell good creative. And he was the CEO of an ad agency, you know? So like he was a bean counter and a charmer, and so how many of these guys at top of these ostensibly, creative corporations can't even tell what's good?
Well, here where I live, it's become like a Netflix company town,
Mm,
and they spend tens of $millions. I don't know how much in kickbacks, but
right.
obviously a lot of kickbacks, but like tens of millions of dollars per episode of these episodic TV things. They film Roswell and Redford's here and um, what's his name from Game of Thrones, George R. Martin, and well,
I'm
I'm not
just
like
saying he needs to finish those books. That's all I'm saying.
I know one thing. I got fired because of him once.
Oh yeah? All right, look, we're down to 9 minutes, but I'd like to hear the story. Go ahead. Let's hear the story.
Okay, so I was working on The Invisible Man with
The movie
you
or the TV series?
a new movie,
A new movie. Okay.
just to be, a remake.
Okay.
And it was really, I loved it. It was very kind of traditional, following the old story. And then, but the company really was courting George R. R. Martin and had this wild idea for a brand new Invisible Man. Next thing I do, I get called into the office and I get fired. I say, it's because of George R. R. Martin, right? Because you got this really slick Invisible Man now. And, and he's George R. R. Martin.
Right.
And so I got paid. No hard feelings, you know what I mean? But it was just, that's how came to, know him. And
Right.
so I didn't like that too much, but at the same time, the fact that I got paid is a miracle.
Oh, did the movie get made? Did he write the
Movie
script?
never got made.
What a
I didn't know.
shock.
I know that Brian has the script. I mean, someone should make that movie,
Oh, okay.
that original Invisible Man, because it had all the bones of the original one. I was a big
Oh,
fan
wait a
of
minute.
it.
No, not yours. Did the George R. R. Martin one ever get made?
And I know what he made. He made I think just on a deal closing, he made like 200K. I know. Versus my 10,000.
Yeah. The guy's a
The
good writer. I'm not going to say he's not a good writer. He's a good writer.
no,
I like those books, but what he's done
nothing
is
wrong with him.
shameful. What he's done is absolutely shameful, you know? And again, talk about gaslighting. He blames his readers. He's blaming us, you know? So,
They put
whatever.
on a show here called Dark Winds, and
Oh, I've
it's
heard
like
of that. Yeah.
kind of Indian, I think it's more Navajo type
Yeah,
perspective.
Navajo Detective or whatever.
Yeah, and it's pretty good, but then every once in a while they'll make fun of white people.
Yeah.
And they do this caricature of white people. And I can't tell whether they're being silly and facetious or they really believe that,
Hmm.
and what they're doing. And Redford's behind the whole thing. And I'm like, and it's just, but anyway, you can't count him out either. He did one of the best movies I've ever seen, which is All Is Lost.
Oh, love that movie. Yes.
Him
Yeah.
on a sailboat, it was just priceless.
Yep. Love that film. I love that
Price.
director too. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but
It didn't even seem like it was directed. It seemed so real to me.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a one-man show. He's the only guy in it until somebody else's hand at the very end.
His acting is just amazing.
Yeah.
The fact that at his age, he's moving around that boat like that,
Right. That's
trying to
true. I
survive.
love Robert Redford. I think he might be one of the greatest or the greatest movie star ever. 3 Days of the Condor, I think is the greatest spy film I've seen. I love that
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
You know, Electric
How do you know
Horseman.
they'll publish it?
Pardon? Oh, right.
Tom, you got this great book. How do you know they'll publish it? Says Cliff Robertson.
Right. Well, that's another movie that, like, with the perspective of time, has become even more powerful because when I saw it as a teenager and he takes it to the New York Times, you walk away thinking, all right, the New York Times is going to publish it and it's going to come out and everybody's going to know about this horrible crime. But now that it's 25 or sorry, 50 years later and it never comes out in the paper, then you know that Times is just as corrupt as everybody else.
Well, I always wondered about that place up on Lookout Mountain,
Yeah.
that studio up there.
Yeah. Lookout Mountain Studio. Yep. Owned by
Uh,
Jared Leto now.
yeah, no, I stayed up there at
Oh.
a actress's house. I rented a room and on Wonderland Avenue.
Mm.
At one point, I was going through a divorce, and I had my typewriter there, and I had a very sparse living situation, but it felt very romantic for a while until my neighbors, I realized I had real loud partying neighbors who would never let me get to sleep. I had to have sleep. I got to sleep in order to write.
Right. Yes.
I have to, usually get to bed early and get up early. And then when I'm not writing, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. But the brain is kind of like the brain cells need to be, nurtured a little bit. And sleep is becoming more and more of I'm not sure if they're doing it to us or how it's happening, but it seems to be more and more of a very precious commodity that is hard to come by.
Yeah, well, I think all this wireless stuff in our house may be screwing with our sleep in some way. I've had people say that. We all do consume a ton of caffeine, or at least I do.
Yeah.
Um,
With my
I
iced
mean,
tea.
yeah, there you go. All right, or through that. So I will say we're coming down to like the last 4 minutes. So let's hit a couple things. The Dark Side of Society. Where can people see it?
It's basically on all the platforms, so
All
it
right,
will
list some of the
eventually
platforms where people might be able to go.
Prime, Apple Plus. It's not, it's, and these, Fandango and, the places like that.
Right.
I don't know them all.
Well, Prime is good. Like, everybody can get to Prime,
I like Prime, and I watched it on Prime
Is
actually,
it on
because
Tubi?
not yet, but it
Okay.
will be on Tubi and Plex and all the, the free stations eventually. And I'm not quite sure. We're working on like foreign distribution and different things right now, so I'm not sure what we're gonna really do with it. I just think um, it's out there now, though.
Right, we know after this, we'll work together to get a list of places where people can put it, and I'll put that in the notes for the video when I put it up there, as well
Yeah,
as the link to.
there's some listed there. They can always go to the crazedhouse.com. That's our company.
Okay,
And
spell that, please.
we are now a distribution company.
Craze?
Crazed.
Crazed. Okay. Um,
Crazedhouse.com. And you'll see Dark Side of Society there, and they'll have where you can get it.
okay. And then I'm also going to include a link to a recent interview that you did with Film Threat and their editor-in-chief, Chris Gore, because I think there's a lot of discussion about the documentary there. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to go over it again here. So I think that's a good
Yeah.
interview.
No,
And
no, the thing I like about them is they have the true indie spirit,
yes, they do.
and they're keeping the flame alive. And thank God. But they just need to get. I'd love to help them, grow.
Well, I think
And
they've experienced good growth in the past couple of years, but yes, I'd like to see them go mainstream. I don't think there is a better modern Siskel and Ebert than Chris Gore and Alan Ing. They're a really good
yeah,
match.
they're a great combination,
They
and
are.
you should have seen that last the award ceremony we went to. They made a whole play out of it. And they had like, the typical Hollywood actress make her appearance and, making fun of her. And, they had this whole thing animated and kind of just going from beginning to end. It just didn't stop the
Right.
show.
Yes.
It wasn't like, okay, here's the awards for best blah, 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 so and so, yay. And then that's it. It just kept going,
Right.
going and
No,
going.
they put a lot of time and effort into this stuff. I really think so,
Yeah.
and um, just as an observation about entertainment or creativity in general, like for music or for movies or that, and I don't want to make this like a Film Threat love fest, but I do think that they're doing it better than most people. Like if you're going to have a team of people, you need one guy that runs hot and one guy that runs cool, and I think like Chris is
So
a
Alan's cool.
yes, exactly. Alan is
And Chris
cool
is
and Chris
Chris is
runs
hot.
hot. Yep, exactly. The same way like, you go the Beatles, it was like, or the Rolling Stones, right? Mick is hot, Keith is cool, I mean Martin Lewis, Jerry Martin was hot,
Well, the late Charlie Watts was cool.
but well, Charlie Watts is a different
He
kind
was
of
he
cool.
was frigid. He was a machine
Yes.
back then.
Yeah, I know.
And then and then of course Mick he's all over everything.
All right,
He's
we're
just
down to less than a minute. Less than a minute.
okay.
I thought this was great. Maybe we can do it
Loved it.
again someday.
Sure.
But I think we got like close to 90 minutes now. I don't want to overwhelm people. Dark Side of Society, good documentary, insightful. Society itself, work of genius. I really do believe that. Final words. Go ahead. Final words.
Well, the final word is we wouldn't be here without society, and probably we wouldn't be here without all the corruption we have today. That's what artists are supposed to be responding to. That's our job,
Right.
and I just hope more, have the courage to jump in.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, artists unite. God bless you,
Yes.
Zeph. God bless
God
you.
bless you, Tom. All right.